Over the past couple of years, Chinese group sets have really been taking the world by storm. What started out as mostly budget mechanical offerings have evolved into hydraulic disc brake, fully electronic, semi-wireless group sets that on paper claim to compete with some of the biggest names in the industry. And I've actually already had some really good experiences with cheap Chinese group sets. Last summer, when I built up my £1,000 gravel bike, mostly using AliExpress parts, I fitted Ltwoo GR9 and had an incredible experience with it, with the only downside being their awkward brake mount they use. And also I've tried their super budget R7 group set, which definitely isn't the highest quality thing in the world, but at such a low price point, I was actually really quite impressed for the money. And all of this has got me wondering, if their mechanical low-end offerings are this good, just how good can their top-of-the-line electronic group sets really be? And ultimately, can they compete with some of the top big-name brands such as Shimano and SRAM? So of course, I had to jump on AliExpress and order myself a full Ltwoo V3 group set to put it to the test. Just a quick note, I have paid for this entirely with my own money, so I am free to tell you whatever I want about this group set. Onto the bike it's going on then. I want to just be clear from the start, ripping Dura Ace off this bike has always been the plan since I bought it. I got a ridiculous deal on my titanium Ribble bike that I wanted to make into a winter training bike, but I think there was some sort of misprice when I bought it, and I ended up getting Dura Ace for pretty much the same price as what they were offering Ultegra for. So the plan was always to take that Dura Ace Di2 off this bike, put it onto whatever new summer race bike I was building up, and save the old frame to become my winter training bike to put all them miles in. Originally the plan to replace its group set was going to be getting 105 Di2, which is widely regarded as one of the best value group sets out there. But in recent time, I'd noticed that ERX V3 had massively come down in price on AliExpress. So I just had to take the punt and see what it was all about, as I really like some of the promises it offers. So the real question here, is it a fully high performance, race ready electronic group set, or are there still some pretty uncomfortable compromises? And by comparing it to Dura Ace, we're comparing it to pretty much the best of the best. So I guess there's one thing left to do. Let's rip this Dura Ace off my Ribble and get ERX on it, and let's find out what I think. Right, the frame is now completely stripped down, even got the fork out and everything. And I've got an absolute mishmash of electronic shifting parts all over my table. Got a big job ahead of me. This bike was in dire need of a service, so yeah, I've decided to go for a full strip and rebuild. Right, now let's talk weight. So first up, let's compare the front mech. So Dura Ace front mech, 96.5 grams, including mounting bolt, and ERX front mech, 140.5, including mounting bolt. Then when it comes to my right shifter, Dura Ace is at 180 grams and Ltwoo 240 grams. Left shifter, Ltwoo again 241 grams, and Dura Ace again 179.5 grams. So again, a huge weight difference there. It doesn't stop with the rear mech. Dura Ace clocking in at 218.3 grams compared to Ltwoo at 288.5 grams. Battery and the two required cables for Ltwoo, and we're looking at 91.5 grams. Then the same battery and two required cables for Dura Ace at 71.0 grams. So yeah, as you can see, there's a really, really big weight penalty swapping to this Ltwoo. I'll add it all up, but I reckon that's over 250 grams difference. So yeah, very much a 105 sort of level group set when it comes to its weights. But it's going on my winter bike, so I'll be happy if the performance is there, as I'm not going to be racing it, so weight isn't completely mission critical. Also, I haven't weighed the brakes yet, as they've got all the hoses attached and it's going to get quite messy. Also, there's so much difference with exactly the mounting hardware you require depending on your bike, so I thought it wouldn't be a fair comparison. Right, time to get these shifters on. Oh yeah, the rubber on these hoods is really quite stiff, especially compared to the really soft Shimano Dura Ace rubber. Oh, flipping it. These are going to be a bit of a work to install, I think. And I wonder if they're going to have the same rattling problem that my GR9 has. We'll find out, I guess. Shifter's loosely on now. Perfect. Next job, let's get the mechs on. Right, you can see the front mech's nice and aligned, rear mech's on, battery seems to be working, the mech's moving, shifters are also on, obviously you need to move them into the correct place. Battery is currently just dangling out the seat post, but yeah, getting there. This has been a long old job, but we're getting there. The shifting's really good now. And actually, even though it's taken me ages to get my head around the app and the calibration and all the settings, actually now I know how it all works. It's actually really good and actually really quite slick the way you calibrate it all in the app. A little bit nerve-wracking. The front mech doesn't actually have any physical limit screws, which is a bit weird. But actually, you know what? Yeah, pretty happy with how it all goes in the app. But yeah, it was a bit of a learning curve, and I think this is one of the big problems of using one of these sort of less documented Chinese group sets is if I go online and Google Dura Ace setup instructions, it's dead easy. L2 setup instructions, aside from their manual and a couple of YouTube videos, that's about all you've got. And maybe reading on some like Weight Weenies forums. So yeah, it's definitely one for a tinkerer and not for somebody who just wants their bike to just work out the box. Anyway, I better go give it a ride now and see how it performs out on the road, because there's one thing it performing on the work stand, and it's a completely different game whether it's going to perform out in the real world. So yeah, I've been properly riding this bike for a good 3 months now, and I'm really quite confident with my opinions on how it's performing. I've really enjoyed it, and as you can see, the bike does look really awesome with the ERX group set, and it definitely doesn't look like you've cheaped out. However, there are some pros and cons to it, which I'm going to discuss in a bit. So jumping back to the present day, it's actually around 5 months after I first installed this L2 group set, and I want to tell you all of my thoughts about its performance. First up, we'll talk shifting performance, because I think obviously that is the ultimate thing when it comes to an electronic group set. And I have to say, especially at the rear, I have no concerns there. It's fast, it's reliable, it's crisp, and it offers that same performance that pretty much every electronic group set does. There is a little bit more I want to talk about the front shifting. The shifting isn't quite on par with Dura Ace, especially not the front. The front mech definitely feels like an early gen Di2 product. It's a bit noisy, a bit clunky, a bit slow. And yeah, it's just not got that instantaneous bang into the big ring that Dura Ace does have. This feels a lot more like that sort of last gen 105 front mech rather than the modern Dura Ace and Ultegra one. Next up are the brakes. And if you've watched any of my content around my gravel build with L2 GR9, you'll know that L2, for some bizarre reason, use this weird spacing for their brake calipers. That means you have to use some really ugly and clunky adapters to get it to fit on most flat mount frames. The mount almost looks more like a post mount rather than these really clean modern flat mount calipers you get with Shimano and other group sets. I have noticed on AliExpress there are some new updated versions of the group that are seeming to start to come with a more traditional looking flat mount caliper. So maybe if you buy it now, have a look and see if you can get that version, because I'm really not a fan of the mounting and I just think it looks pretty ugly. The other thing you can do is you can swap to one of these Z-Race calipers that is actually quite a bit lighter and is the more sort of traditional flat mount. As fortunately, it is a mineral oil group set, so pretty much any standard mineral oil road caliper will work with it. But actual braking performance, I've had no issues with. I've found really powerful bite on the brakes, no problems anywhere, and the setup with the bleeding and installation was an absolute breeze. No more difficult than bleeding a Shimano hydraulic group set. Onto the ergonomics, I do actually find the shifter ergonomics pretty good. Now, is it as good as Dura Ace? I personally, from my hands, prefer the feel of the Shimano levers. And I personally think them Shimano Di2 levers of the current gen are basically the most comfortable shifters I've ever used. The only thing that might compete with it is SRAM E1. And I really want an excuse to get my hands on a set. So let me know in the comments below if you want to see me trying out SRAM E1. But back onto the L2, yeah, the ergonomics are good. It is slightly chunkier than a Shimano shifter. However, it's nowhere near as chunky as old school SRAM access shifters. It blows them out the water when it comes to ergonomics. The lever adjustment was fine. There is a bit of reach adjustment on the lever, and I pretty much had it on the most outboard position and it worked fine for me. I've got quite big hands though, so if you're someone with smaller hands, you might want to be just a little bit more mindful about the ergonomics. There is one thing distinctly missing from the shifter hoods that Shimano Ultegra, Dura Ace and the latest SRAM offerings have, and that is some sort of auxiliary button or ability to plug in sort of sprint/satellite shifters. It's purely just the 2 shifter blade paddles. You can customize them to whatever style you want. However, there also isn't an option in the app, as far as I'm aware, to have the new Shimano, what I think they call front shift neck system, where both the buttons shift up or down into the other state. So you do have to stick with a traditional 1 button for up, 1 button for down. And actually, coming off Dura Ace and riding that L2 a lot this winter is something that's taken a bit of getting used to again. And that leads us on to the app and all the sort of software experience of this group set. Now, one of the biggest concerns of buying an electronic Chinese group set is that the app is going to be clunky and difficult to use. And unfortunately, there is a bit of that, but the amount of customization you get in the app is phenomenal. Firstly, and I think this is such an obvious feature for an electronic group set, is you can choose what speed you want it to be. Why Shimano and SRAM are so scared to do this, I guess they're just worried that it's going to lose them money if you could just upgrade 11 speed to 12 speed like that. Let's say your bike's currently got a full 11 speed drivetrain and you don't want to have to buy a whole new 12 speed system. You set it up for 11 speed until your drivetrain wears out, replace it with 12 speed stuff when that's got a bit cheaper, and suddenly you've got a free upgrade to 12 speed. Like, it's just such an obvious thing for group set manufacturers to do, and it's so frustrating that it's only the Chinese brands like L2, like Wheeltop, that are actually doing it. Come on, Shimano and SRAM, get rid of your stupid anti-consumer, anti-environmental, profit-led decision and allow us to just upgrade them to whatever the latest and greatest speed is. And because of this, I'm pretty confident in the future, if 13 speed becomes ubiquitous, I'm sure L2 could push an update through their app that allows you to reconfigure it to be a 13 speed group set. And sticking with all that customizability in the app, something else they do amazingly well, which can be a bit of a blessing and a curse, is you can customize the exact alignment of every single sprocket on the rear. So if there's just one cog that's slightly out of alignment, I don't know, maybe your block's a bit worn or something and one of them is just clicking that little bit, you can individually dial that gear in and get it perfectly lined up. Now, obviously, that does come with a downside that if you start messing around with the micro adjust too much, you can kind of screw up the whole configuration. I've definitely done this myself and had to just factory reset everything. Another thing about the app, despite being very impressed with its experience, once I got it set up, when I first installed it, it was all in Chinese, despite being on like an English iPhone with an English account. I had to then dig into the Chinese settings menu and guess pretty much where the language option was and changed it all to English. I can imagine a user that's not quite as tolerant to these things as me just getting so frustrated at that. However, once it is set to English, it was quite a crisp experience. And I've used quite a lot of Chinese bike apps now for various different things like power meters and turbos. And I have to say, L2's is the top one that I've experienced yet. Next up is the whole sort of charging experience, and this is where L2 absolutely kills it in my opinion. They use USB-C to recharge it natively into the front mech. And now, I know that's a water ingress risk, and L2 have not been immune to water ingress problems in the past, but being able to plug in your universal charger that basically every single smartphone these days has into your group set to charge it is phenomenal. If you ever got stuck at a cafe where your gears have run out of battery, I'm pretty certain someone will have a USB-C charger knocking around. Or let's say you're out bike packing, you could use your power bank and phone charger just to whack a little bit more juice into the gears. However, I don't think that's going to be a problem because the battery life's been pretty spot on for me. In the whole time I've had this group set, I charged it once when I first got it, and then I charged it once more about a couple of months ago. And other than that, there's not been any problems. So I would say battery life feels about on par with what you get from Shimano Di2. Now obviously how much you shift and whether you have it in the faster performance mode or in the slower sort of eco mode will make a bit of a difference, especially with that front mech. And the whole wiring setup when you're installing the group set, as you saw before, very much follows the Shimano style system where the rear mech is kind of the control unit, plugs in to the battery, so does the front mech, and that is it. There's just them two mechs, plug into the battery. The shifters are almost completely separate and wireless, so there's no running cables through your headset to the front of the frame. Obviously, it's not as easy as a true wireless system like SRAM Access or I guess Wheeltop, but for the sort of semi-wireless system, it is just as easy to sort as Shimano. One thing to note, the cables are a bit different to the E-tube cables, and they actually have a few, I think it's 4 pins inside them, so it is important to line them up. And I imagine if you start like mashing them about in the port, they might be a bit more fragile. Secondly, we can't ignore the past that Ltwoo has had with their early gen electronic group sets. They did have a lot of water ingress problems in them first few generations that I've not had any issues with, just to put that out there, and I have been riding in some pretty grim UK weather, but that does still loom over them, and it's something Shimano I don't think have really had much of a problem with. I seem to remember GCN did a video where they like lobbed their bike in a sea and then left it with salt all over it and their shifting still worked. Another drawback that might matter to you, and it generally matters to me, except for not too much on this winter bike, is the weight. This is no light group set, and I think it's more comparative to a 105 level group set when it comes to weight, as it's heavier than Ultegra Di2 and definitely a lot heavier than my Dura Ace Di2. I think a lot of that does come from some of just the bulk here and there, and I do think if they try to make it as light as Dura Ace, you probably would start to run into durability issues. Don't buy this for an ultralight bike. Now I'm going to move on to probably the main reason why most people would consider one of these Chinese group sets, the price. And it's always a point of contention when it comes to these cheap Chinese group sets because of this one big thing they all exclude pretty much. They generally are just the shifters, mechs, batteries and brakes. So when you're making a price comparison, yes, the headline price seems super aggressive, but you've got to remember to add them on. Now for my price comparison, I'm going to assume we're comparing this to 105 Di2 as that's the most price relevant group set. And when I had a look online, getting a 105 chain set, cassette, chain and brake rotors probably has set you back in the region of about £200. So I'm going to add £200 onto the price I paid for this. And what did I pay for it, you ask? Well, I bought this group set from AliExpress. And what AliExpress do is in their headline price that you see, that includes an estimate for import tax. Here in the UK, I have actually, in the 3 or 4 years of buying far too much stuff off AliExpress, I have never once had to pay any form of import duty. So when I've been quoting prices, I will knock that off and just talk about exactly what I actually had to pay. The other thing is they pretty much perpetually have coupon codes that get you around 10% off. And at times that can be even as good as sort of 15 to 20% off. Wherever I make videos about AliExpress, I will leave them in the description below if you want to use one of my coupon codes. So when you take all of them discounts into account, I ended up paying, and what you could go on there and buy it for right now is about $460, which equates to roughly 350 British pounds. You'll have to let me know in the comments though, because I'm a bit unsure what to do. Should I keep quoting prices as to what I actually had to pay, or do I give you kind of the worst case scenario price if you did get unlucky and had to pay the import duty? Because at the end of the day, I'm making these videos for you guys and I want to know what you think about it. So back onto the price then, £350 plus £200 for all the drivetrain takes us up to a headline figure of £550. I had a little shop around online and it seems to be the going rate for a complete 105 Di2 group set is about 800 at the minute, which yeah, makes Shimano's RRPs look like absolute ridicule. Ultegra as well is about £1,000 to £1,100. So the price gap to 105 is about £200 to £250 cheaper. So it definitely offers a big discount versus the Western manufacturers. And of course, you're not tied into using Shimano's drivetrain. if you wanted to shop around AliExpress and get some of the really good drivetrain stuff like Xenix cranksets, Speedal cassettes, you could probably get it a lot lighter than 105 for quite considerably cheaper. I reckon you could build it up, the full drivetrain, for about £100 on top of the cost of the group set. At that point, it's starting to get real competitive. However, of course, despite I think the performance being equally as good as 105 Di2, there are still some drawbacks. And the big one is you've got a Chinese group set. So if you ever needed to go to a bike shop, how comfortable would they be to work on it? I'm really not sure. And if you turned up with 105 Di2, they're not going to bat an eyelid. But yeah, turning up with ERX, either you've got a really cool mechanic that, you know, likes a bit of a challenge, or they're like, we don't want to touch this, we're not insured, we're not, you know, we don't want any risk. Only buy this if you are someone who enjoys tinkering and are confident in doing all the work yourself, which is something I personally really enjoy doing. And I find like actually part of the experience of owning it is playing around, getting it set up, and I find really rewarding. So to answer that headline question of the video, ripping Dura Ace off my winter bike in favour of Ltwoo ERX. Do I regret it? Well, no, it works perfectly fine for my needs. Is it as good as Dura Ace? Well, I think it's pretty clear that no, it's not. But it's not anywhere near in that price bracket of Dura Ace. And I think it actually does offer a very solid competition with 105 Di2. And if you are in the market for building up a bike in that sort of £1,000 to £2,000 region, I think this is something you seriously should be considering. For me, this makes sense. It's my winter training bike. I want something easy where there's not going to be cables that are getting crusty. So I do want electronic, but I also don't want to be paying stupid money for something that's going on the horrible, salty British roads in the winter. But if you offered for free to replace that L2 for either Ultegra or Dura Ace Di2, I'd rip your hand off. 105 though, I'm not so sure. I'm pretty much on the fence, and I think it's pretty much a toss-up. They are basically as performant as each other. I will leave the group set and store I bought it off linked in the description, along with them coupon codes I was talking about, if you want to try it for yourself. I hope you enjoyed seeing my experiences in the video, and I will keep you updated if I do have any issues down the line with this group set. So make sure you get subscribed, and if you want to be the first to know on any of the updates of the exciting new products I'm checking out, go over and follow my Instagram, as I often post quick stories of installing random parts, putting things on the scales, or if I've had any issues while out riding. And whilst you might say there are other Chinese offerings other than just L2, well, yes, I know. We might be having some more content coming soon with this thing right here. But that's for another day. Until then, I'll see you all in the next one.